All right, hey guys, welcome back to the Melanin Margin season 2. We back. As always, this is the talk show dedicated to bringing the marginalized to the spotlight and uplift the Black voices that will no longer stay silent. So let's get into this week's race conversation, the insurrection at the Capitol. So, what are some of your first thoughts when you heard the news about the insurrection going on, Daquon?
Child, that entire day was just, it was so many different things happening at once. At first, I was like, is this happening? Like, what? And then I was like, you know what? Sounds about white. Sounds
It,
about white that this would be happening. It was just one of those situations that it was not scary because, like, at this point in my life, I've kind of accepted that things like this happens and it happens
Mhm.
so often. Well, maybe not a coup, but things like this happens. But it was also just like so many different emotions happening at the same time. Like there was part of me that was like laughing because it's so ironic that 4 years ago these are the same people that's like, oh well, like if you don't like the results of the election you can leave, like y'all lost and now they lost and they're trying to overthrow the government. But also just like thinking about these people were able to get into what should have been like one of the most secure buildings in our country, and they were able to just like walk right in. And if that's not the embodiment of white privilege, I don't know what is.
Honestly, it was so, I want to say it was surprising. Like, I want to say the same thing, like, oh my God, I was so shook. But like the same thing which you said, it sounds about white. Like when I was watching it, I was like, oh my God. And then I was like, yeah, just like, it was like, yeah, that makes sense because the reality is, I mean, this is Donald Trump empowered so many racists and so
Right.
many people to be authentically themselves and authentically their hatred. He made that hatred very, very clear. And I think that when I saw this, it was just like, oh my God, like, I mean, part of me was extremely terrified to some extent because these people were able to get into the building. Now, it was one thing for them to be protesting at first,
Right.
but when they actually penetrated the building with military grade weaponry, it's like, oh my God, like what is about to happen? Like, I was like, is this about to be the purge anarchy? Like, what is about to go on? Like, what is really about to go on? Like, are they about to, is this about to be a coup? Is this about to be like some kind of, takeovers, hostile takeover? Like, it was just extremely terrifying because what a lot of the journalists were saying was that this building hasn't ever been penetrated in over 200 years. I mean, 2 centuries. I mean, take a moment to take in the fact that this has not happened in over 200 years.
Right.
I mean, so I was very afraid because I was like, I don't know what the plan was, and I don't know what they were actually trying to do when they got in. That's the scariest part because it's like not only were they able to break in, but they were able to get into some of the most secure parts of the building. Not just
Exactly.
not just inside the building, but in some of the most secure parts of the building. And I'm just like, baby, how? Well, not how, but baby, for real? Like, this is what we really gonna do? Like, y'all ain't even gonna try. Y'all are not even going to try to make it seem like y'all gonna keep that same energy y'all had with Black Lives Matter.
Mm.
Daquan, I would ask you, do you see the difference between how they responded or the response to a protest from Black Lives Matter to a literal riot at the Capitol when it
Yeah,
was white people in charge?
literally the difference is night and day. Like I remember, when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening in DC, they had Capitol officers lined on the steps. lined all over the state.
Snipers.
So many different protections for people who they didn't even get to the Capitol. They were on the street. They were on the street and they were gassed and tear gas, rubber bullets, all of that stuff. And these people were able to enter the building. They were able to literally walk in, take selfies with police
Oh,
officers,
yes.
and they were able to find offices that are supposed to be hidden, literally offices that nobody knows about except for the people that go there. So the difference between how the response was to this insurrection, this act of terrorism, compared to a protest, it's astronomical. Like thinking about how differently they responded, like the people who had this insurrection were the same people over the summer calling Black Lives Matter terrorists. These were the same
Mm-hmm.
people talking about, Blue Lives Matter, protect the blue or whatever. Now
Mm-hmm.
y'all are getting into fights with the police officers. Like
Mm-hmm.
y'all are the ones causing this terror and all of these things. So the energy just never matches up. It's always been about race when it comes to how people are treated.
And part of me is actually thankful that this happened because anytime that anybody want to say, "Oh, well, Black Lives Matter is a blah 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 is a terror," I'm like, baby, no, 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 baby, no, no, no. Anytime anybody wants to argue that racism does not exist, I want them to watch the Capitol building during the insurrection and watch the Capitol building during the Black Lives Matter protests that were, again, like you said, on the streets, not even at the Capitol steps, and see the night and day. See the fact that if I can't even imagine if it was the story was Black Lives Matter protesters were storming the Capitol building with military grade weapons. I can't even imagine. It would have been a massacre. It would have been
They would have had snipers, they would have had tanks, they would have everything.
people would have been dead. Black lives would have been taken that day. You know what I'm saying? It was so revealing to me because the whole time I was thinking, well, I was like, as it was going on, because I was watching and looking at updates as it was happening, and I was like, they're not actually going to let them get in the building. Like, I mean, just because I don't rock with Mike Pence or whatever the case may be, he is the vice president of the United States of America at the time, was, but he was, at the time of that insurrection, he was the vice president of the United States. So, and if he was present there, I mean, yeah, for me in my head, I was like, it's not going to happen. Like, they're not going to get in because that's a breach of security.
Right.
Like they would never let them that close to the vice president. And if you look, there was this one video of this Black officer that was leading the rioters away.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently they were like maybe a few feet away from where the actual vice president and all the Senate people were.
Yeah.
I mean, that is, Daquon, that is terrifying. To think that they were that close. I mean, literal feet away. If that guy hadn't done what he did.
Exactly. And those intentions were clear. Like they had military grade weapons. They had all types of zip ties ready to take hostages. Like all of these, like it's crazy to think about what would have happened if that officer did not lead them away. But we know what would have happened. We know what their intentions were.
Oh, absolutely. It's called terrorism. That's what I believe the term is called terrorism. Terrorism. I think that's a term, Daquon, if I'm not mistaken.
You're correct.
I was making sure because people don't understand that the fact that I don't know about you, Daquon, but I don't know how to navigate a Capitol building. I don't know what's in the Capitol building.
Not at all.
Like aside from where the Senate people are, and I don't know how to get through or how to maneuver through. These people pretty much had a good layout of where to go and what to do. You see what I'm saying? It's
Yeah,
like,
'cause if you think about it, like you have the Senate, every state has two senators, every state has multiple members of the House of Representatives. So you think about like hundreds of offices that are in that building, and people were able to go to very specific offices. Like there are so many offices in that building, and they were able to find certain members of Congress, their offices, just waltz right in. And then even beyond that, just them being able to look through people's letters, their laptops, take whatever they want
yes,
out of the office.
yes.
The breach of security, that is insurmountable.
And my whole thing is, like we were just saying, we know what the plan was, because as there were some videos about the one white lady who was like, "Oh, I got maced," and blah blah blah, and she was like, and the guy asked her, why did you want to get into the Capitol building? It was like, it's a revolution. For what? What are you fighting for, baby?
White supremacy.
Oh, got you. We're fighting for white people now. We're fighting for the oppressed party of white people. Like you have to laugh at the ridiculousness of this, because it's like y'all were fighting for white supremacy. That's exactly what that was. No, and I mean no masks,
No.
no masks. So they were not afraid to show their faces. They were not afraid to show their faces. They were very clear about what their plans were and what their goals were. And my biggest thing, a reaction to this whole story, is what happened after the fact. That was what really shook me, because we all knew we all knew that they could get in. We all knew that was going to happen, the insurrection or some kind of the attempt at a civil war type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
We all knew that was in the making of happening. But the reaction after the fact, after people were saying, "Oh, it was a protest," no, it was a riot, and the fact that these people, all the ones who took Instagram videos, Twitter videos, all this stuff, and being like, "Yeah, we're doing this, we're doing that, we got in, whatever," and all they're done is put on a no-fly list. That's about it. That's
If that.
if that.
Like I remember seeing the FBI tweet out, "If you have any information about these people, please let us know." And I'm like, you're the FBI.
Oh
Like the
no,
history of the FBI and how they surveillance, especially Black artists and activists, like there's no reason the FBI should not have known who was at this insurrection, especially thinking about like they're posting it on social media. They don't have any mask on. They're running around, faces all out there. There's so many opportunities for them to figure out who these people are, and yet they still have questions about it. They need more information.
I don't buy that not 1 minute. I don't buy any of that, because I'm sorry, baby. If you say the wrong coupling of words in a sentence next to your phone or any kind of listening device, baby, the FBI knocking at your door. Like,
Right.
knock knock, who's this? Like, you see what I'm saying? If you say the wrong words about the president, about trying to do something bad or malicious to the president, baby, the FBI gonna be knocking on your door. So I really do not believe with any part of my being, because that there was no one who knew this was happening. And somebody said something that really kind of stuck with me. I don't know exactly who. Please comment down below if y'all know, but there was somebody who said this is the representation of how deep systemic racism goes. Because, huh?
Say it again.
I mean, this is a representation of how deep systemic racism goes, because the reality is these people were able to get into the building. These people were able to, or basically have an organized attack on the Capitol building. Somebody had to make that. Somebody had to text somebody, let somebody know that's what's going to be happening. Somebody had to say, "Get your zip ties, get your guns, get your stuff, because you know what we're about to do." The fact that they had zip ties, that's not, it's one thing to have your little guns, but no, they had zip ties. So there was a plan. There was definitely an organized plan on the moves that were about to be made towards the Capitol building. So you're telling me that the US government, the FBI, the people who are always listening, the FBI agent who's winking at you right now through your little computer screen right now on your little camera,
Not our
did
FBI
not know that this
agent.
is happening? I mean, do you buy that 1 minute, Daquon?
I'm just like, how, like, they knew that this was happening. Like, even beyond just like the insurrection, they knew that the rally that started this all was going to happen. And you're telling me that you have all of these extra officers for a Black Lives Matter protest, but you know that there was going to be a Trump rally on the day that the election would have been certified, and y'all didn't beef up security at all? That
Because
that was
white
just an
people aren't
oversight?
seen as violent, right, Daquon? White people don't do bad things. Only Black people do.
Mm.
In the eyes of the government, in the eyes of the police, white people are not a threat. And like you just said, that is the this whole insurrection is the most realistic version of that reality. The fact that these people said they were going to have a protest that was going to go through Washington, that was going to pass the Capitol building, and no one was like, maybe we might want to have a police officer or some state troopers or something out there just to make sure.
Maybe a
But
little bit more than a couple.
maybe. But no, that it wasn't even thought about. It wasn't even second guess. But when Black Lives Matter was the protest, and oh no, haha, not the Capitol building, maybe not this Capitol building.
Y'all are too close. The street is too close.
The street is too close, and that just like I said, it infuriates me that this is our reality. That this is the reality that we're living in. That white people, even still, are seen as so innocent, are seen as not a threat. And it is so frustrating, Daquon. It is so frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't.
And even just like the protections that have been made for these people afterwards. Like, I remember just thinking about how, like, the aftermath and how, things are protecting these people who
Yes.
stormed the Capitol. Like, I remember looking up stories about how people were using dating apps like Bumble and like finding the people and reporting them to the FBI, and then the dating apps would like block certain things so that this could stop. And I'm like, so you're stopping the reporting of terrorists. You are protecting terror. Like, in this moment, the dating lives of terrorists is more important than our country.
And I'm just trying to figure out where it was the same energy with the newscasters too. Because they were so quick to be like, I think we need to classify Black Lives Matter as a terrorist group. I think we might have to think about that. I think that we have to, they're rioting, they're doing this, they're doing that, they're doing this, they're doing that. And it's kind of like, it's real quiet on a newscape.
Right.
It was real quiet about people saying, or these are just protesters. No, baby, say what they are, Trump supporters. Stop with this picky choosy language that y'all use. It's like, oh no, these are just protests. No, they was rioters. These were Trump supporting rioters, pro-Trump rioters. But no, they don't want to say that.
Yeah, I think that was the most frustrating part about the entire thing. It felt so emotionally gaslighting that the entire time people were like, this is not our America. This is not and I'm like, this has been the America that I've lived in for how many, like, this is the definition of why we say that there are two Americas. It may not be the America you've been living in, but it's the America that so many people have been experiencing.
Baby, when I heard people say over and over, white people, it's always the quiet, just, this is not who we are. This is not America. And every Black person was like, baby, what? This ain't America.
Right.
Where you been living? Where you been living, baby? And that really, once again, it shows just how deep this goes. That even white celebrities who are like thinking they're trying to stand up for us or trying to stand up for Black people or people of color, we realize that, baby, yeah, you are. This is where we go back to our conversation that why white people benefit from institutionalized racism, because even people who claim to be allies or claim to be supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement are using the incorrect language to describe what happened at the insurrection,
Right.
because of institutionalized racism. Because when we see blatant displays of racism, when we see blatant displays of the mistreatment of people of color versus white people, it's always seen as what? An anomaly. As something that doesn't occur it seldom ever happens. This is not what we are. This is not who we are. No, baby, you just don't talk about it with the right language. That's the problem. When things like this happen, when blatant racism happens, this is not discussed. It's not discussed with the correct language. That's the problem.
Right. Because so many times people are able to put minorities in a box. They're like, oh, well, like Black people are just aggressive, they commit more crimes, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But the minute we see something like this, it's like, this is not who we are. This is not all white people. Like, so many different excuses, to be frank, excuses. And at the end of the day, like, if you don't realize that this is not the America you've been living in, that's a privilege that you had. You just figured out what privilege is. Because a lot of times people get it misconstrued as like, oh, privilege is something that, it actively affects me every single day. No, privilege can be simply not even having to think about racism, not even thinking that things like this could happen. And even in this aftermath of what happened, I saw so many people being like, well, just like, we just got to stick through till Biden gets inaugurated and then it will all be over. Like, no, this does not end there. Like, what
baby, we get to that.
we're going to get to that, but what happens there happened so many years ago. It will continue to be happening because that's just what white supremacy does. It permeates all throughout history.
And that's the reality that we live in. And I think that do you remember when people kept saying like, well, we don't think that Black anchors should be reporting on Black Lives Matter because they have what is it called? A bias to it. Yet we're seeing nothing but white people reporting on what's going on at the Capitol or what happened at the Capitol. Nothing with white people. And no one's saying, wait, don't you have you might have a stake in this. No one's saying that. No one's having that conversation because what race doesn't matter right now? That's what people say. Race is in the past right now. That's what people want to say. That's what people want to believe.
I don't see color.
I don't see. It's not that. They're just terrorists. No, say what it is. This is racism in its most clearest form. This is a blatant display of racism, white supremacy, white privilege, and I mean, just all the whites, all the everything that you can think about that we have been talking about and discussing. It's all of it in one little setting, in one specific event. America has shown us exactly who they were. They already showed us who they were when they elected Trump in the first place.
Right.
But now, especially, and the fact that we're still even debating whether or not Trump should be fully impeached is just
like, first of all, how do you get impeached twice? How do you get impeached by the House twice in your presidency? And you only had one term. Like, if you have to get impeached twice, That should
And
speak for itself. I have no words.
it's just, it's crazy. And people want to always go off and be like, because Michelle Obama said it when she's like, if Obama did even 1/5, 1/10 of what Donald Trump has done, I mean, he would have been out of office so fast. Baby, he would have been in prison. Okay, let's be real. He would have been in prison.
If
So
that, if
if
that, he would have been dead.
honestly, and it's just crazy because we're still debating whether or not Trump should be impeached. And people keep forgetting that impeaching this man, fully impeaching Trump, means that he will lose government funding that is given to all the presidents who leave. And it keeps him from running again. That is the realty right there. This man has been banned from every social media platform ever. This man was defending this riot, defending these insurrectionists. This man incited the riot because he lost.
Right.
And
but years ago, it's like, oh, y'all lost. We won the electoral college. Like, who cares about the popular vote?
in that, we have been talking about dismantling the electoral college. We have been talking about that. But when it's in white favor, it's not a problem, right?
Not a problem.
Not a problem at all. When Donald Trump won, it was, oh, the electoral college, baby, y'all mad because the popular vote didn't win, blah, 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 blah. Y'all was popping off real good at the mouth. But when the electoral college benefits the Democratic Party, or when the electoral college benefits not white people, or doesn't benefit white people, or benefits people of color instead, oh, it's a problem.
It's rigged.
It's rigged. It's rigged. We've been saying that about that, even when Trump was elected. But we had no words then. Nobody had something to say about that then.
Mm-hmm.
But now that Biden won, it's rigged. It's that they tried, they did this. It's a packed vote. Everybody kept saying it was people going to the car, changing the vote. I'm like, bro, y'all really doing the most right now. Like, he lost. He lost. I'm sorry.
Right. Like, voter fraud's a myth. Like, the amount of cases of voter fraud is so insignificant that it would not have changed the results of the election at all.
And my thing is, everybody's like, Biden ain't gonna do that. Biden ain't gonna do it. I'm like, let me just be really honest with you. The reason we wanted Biden elected has nothing to do with the fact that we think that Biden's gonna change the world. Okay, let's be really 100 right there. Biden is not magical. He is still an old white man. Okay, let's just be 100 with that. And he still benefits from a lot of the institutions that are in place to protect white people. So we are not sitting here saying that Biden is the Lord and Savior. He's not Jesus. He's not something supernatural. He's still a white man. But the reality is, he is way better than Donald Trump, okay?
Light years
better. I would rather have a white, somewhat racist than a full-fledged Ku Klux Klan member, okay?
Right.
That's just the reality there. And I think that people were really having the conversation about when Black people heard about the insurrection and everything, that we were the ones talking about it, the truth, as it really was, as a riot, as a display of white supremacy, as America, because that is America. This is America.
Yeah. So many times, like, we get so wrapped up in like American exceptionalism. Like, we are such this great country that's well beyond, we are the standard. But if anything, this shows us that, America's not this exceptional thing. Like, America has its flaws. It has blatant problems that's been going on for years. But you see rhetorics, especially from like the right, of like third world countries and how their governments are getting overthrown. And like, now our government, people are trying to overthrow our government. And like, you hear this a lot on TikTok, but America is essentially a third world country with a Gucci belt. Like, all of these problems that we see in other countries are just projections of problems that exist in our own spaces, except that we think that we're better. Like, we think that any problem is just minor, it's nothing bad.
Or that we don't want to have the real conversations of actually talking about the problems with this. I mean, even with America, like even when Donald Trump and Mike Pence were interviewed about white supremacy or about institutionalized racism, they were like, it doesn't exist. It's not real.
Right.
And it's like it's that kind of dialect or that kind of rhetoric further perpetuates white supremacy. It keeps it in power. Dismantling this system is not going to be easy. And the first thing it starts with is people or leaders in charge that understand that white supremacy is an issue,
Right.
that condemn white supremacy.
That's the key. Because for so long, people are just like, we've moved past it. You know, we had a black president, we've moved past racism and all that stuff. And the reality is, white supremacy is still just as alive as it is now as it was in the 1960s, as it was in the 1800s. Like, it's still been going on. And in order for us to actually have progress, we need to have these conversations. We need to be able to call out white supremacy within our borders and not cast it aside as an anomaly. We need to be able to reconcile that these are things that are integral to the foundation of America. America was built upon these principles. And we need to be able to recognize that in order to move past that, in order to dismantle these systems that were built upon white supremacy.
And the fact that we have to understand that, like you just said, America was built on the backs of black bodies, Native American bodies, Asian bodies, Latinx bodies. Like America is not the greatest country in the world. America has problems that run deep into the soil. You see what I'm saying? And people acting as if, like you said before, we're this perfect nation above racism, above sexism, above LGBTQ discrimination, acting as if we have made some strides,
Just a
but
little.
not many. But not many, baby. You know, yes, black men and women are not slaves, but we've replaced plantations with prison systems.
Mm.
Where a majority of the prisons are taken up by black people, by black bodies, by
Right.
black men who did the same crime as a white man, but the white man is free and the black man gets 15, 20 years for a drug charge. There was this joke that Chris, I believe was it Chris Rock, who said in his special, he was like, if you should be able to go to a court, and if you could find a lighter sentence, you should be able to do it like a bargain bin. It's kind of like, well, this person had the same crime as I did, but they got 5 years. Why do I get 15? Can I get the 5 years of the mark instead? But you
Price
know, it's
match.
not funny, but it's just like realizing the reality of America, realizing that we have basically, racism has just been modified. It's not been erased or eradicated. It's just evolved. It's evolved into the suppression of black voters. It's evolved into the disrespect of black women. It's evolved into digital blackface. You know, it's evolved, it's changed, but it has not gone away. It's just like our technology advances, just like our experiences change, so does racism. It advances with society as well.
Exactly.
And until we start having these conversations, until we start having these discussions and really breaking down where this stuff is rooted in, we will never make true progress because we're still working with the same stuff that has been affecting us for centuries.
And even beyond just having these discussions, if we don't have accountability measures, we'll never move past that. Like, if we
Absolutely.
never have accountability measures where white supremacists who storm the Capitol can be punished for their crimes. They
Yes.
literally committed treason. They literally stole the Capitol. Like, they did all of these things, and yet the repercussions are nothing compared to
Non-existent.
what would happen if they were Black people.
And that's the scariest part to me, is that people, they don't report this part of the insurrection. But when we see, and you look, if you go out and search for it, the people who actually have the Instagram videos, there was a girl, I want to say she was like, I don't know if she was 18, 16, 17, whatever, but she was there too, and she was trying to auction off some of the stuff that she stole from the Capitol. Did you remember that story? Did you hear about
Right.
that story?
Yeah.
And she was returned to the custody of her mother. And she was well within the prison age that people, that Black boys and girls at 16, 17, 18 will be put under.
Right. Like, you're
The men,
auctioning off things that could be super high security, and you get a slap on the wrist, and that's it.
you get a slap on the wrist. This goes deep. A slap on the wrist is what a lot of these people have gotten. I have not heard stories of mass incarceration about this, about what happened in insurrection at the Capitol. Because in my opinion, that's exactly what should have happened. Every person who was accounted for there should have been put into some kind of prison.
Right. Because I remember literally being on the phone, FaceTiming you when this was happening. And we were talking about the curfew, and there was live footage after the curfew, people still there in masses. But let this have been a Black Lives Matter protest and they enacted a curfew. They would have been driven with tear gas and rubber bullets and all of these things. But, they
They would have
enacted
been
curfew for
dead. They'd have been dead.
dead.
They'd have been
Literally.
dead.
You don't see a whole bunch of notices of arrest or anything, or you may see some, but their sentences are a lot less, or, they can get put out on bail or whatever.
Or
And
the fact
there's
that,
the accountability.
or the fact that we're not reporting it. That no one's reporting what's happened after the aftermath of the insurrection. We don't see that on The View, or the Real, or all these other political shows. We don't hear nothing about that. We heard about the incident, but Black Lives Matter, they could not keep their mouths shut.
Right. Talked about it all summer, even though it was found that over 90% of Black Lives Matter protests were peaceful.
But they want to call us the rioters. We're a terrorist group. That's what we're told. And it just, like I said, I know it's not surprising, but it's just kind of like seeing how even the media doesn't want to talk about the fact that this should still be a conversation topic. This is historic. Literally historic. Just like the Black Lives Matter protest that went on across the nation or whatever was a historic moment. This wasn't a historic moment,
Right.
which should have been discussed for weeks.
Literally years from now, some children are, during their like AP exams or whatever, are going to be writing about this very moment.
And that's just that. It's crazy to me, because all I can think to myself is, like I said before, if it was Black people, this wouldn't even been a thing. I mean, even when we look at some of the reactions or people talking about how that the quote unquote response they were trying to do, they said that this was an inside job. There was ideas that this was an inside job, because it obviously was. And people had literally nothing to say. There were 10 and 15 people put in their investigation about it, but we have not heard anything else about them since.
Right.
There were people who were discussing that, oh yes, this had to be something had to have happened to let them all in. The barricades were taken down. Why are these police officers in jail? Exactly. The people taking selfies with the police, with the protest, the rioters. Why are they not in jail?
And the evidence stacks up. Like we said before, there are so many offices and people just know where to go to. There were offices that were specifically hidden away and people were able to get into them. Or even beyond that, just there have been reports that, certain senators or congress people had the panic buttons in their offices taken out before this. And it's like
Yes.
like all of these things add up, and like y'all are not mathing the math. Like I this is not calculus.
and and this is just the most baffling thing. Like, we have no more discussion about it. We have no one trying to say, okay, what's next? What's the response? What's the conversation? What's the next move? The next action that needs to take place in order to make sure that this doesn't happen again, in order to make sure that people are made examples of. Because all this teaches budding white supremacists is that we can do whatever the freak we want to do and we'll be just fine.
Right.
There is no examples being made. There is no this is wrong. You shouldn't. There is no real consequences for their actions of terrorism and attempted usurp of the government.
And there's this overemphasis of Trump. Like, oh, Trump's out of office, he's off of these social media. Like, we've done something to hold people accountable. But at the end of the day, like, you can look at some of the rhetoric that came out, and some of these same people were talking about Trump is a traitor now. Like, Trump was just their figurehead. They were the fire. He was like the lighter or whatever. Like, these people are going to do these things regardless of Trump or not. Like, Trump was just the person that they can put their faith behind to fuel their fire.
And I think that's what people really don't understand. They're kind of like, well, now that we got Trump out, we're done. And I'm like, baby, you're missing the bigger picture here. You're missing the fact that a reality TV show star with no government experience was able to become the most powerful person in America. He didn't do that by himself. And
Right.
I don't give a freak how much money you got in all of history. This has never happened before.
Debatably,
Even,
there was also Reagan.
huh? Well. But he wasn't a reality TV show star. I'm sorry. Like, I can't. That's no tea, no shade, but you don't see Flavor Flav running for you know what I mean? Like, it's just, we're forgetting that this man was a reality TV show star, a
Right.
literal reality TV show star.
No
No
experience
government experience.
whatsoever. I'm like,
No.
if I have to have 3 to 5 years experience for an entry level job, if you are the president of the United States, I think you need a little bit more experience than an entry level job.
But again, this is the biggest picture. The biggest picture right here is the fact that he was able to take the most powerful position in America and was able to do all 4 years without being taken out of chair, with all the things that he has done. And everybody's like, well, now that he's out, I'm kind of like, baby, you think that evil's just gonna stop? Like, you think that they're like, we're done, we're defeated, Biden's there, we're finished? That's not how this works. Baby, there's gonna be another Trump in the next 4 years. He might not look the same, he might not even act the same, but he's gonna be there.
Right. And if anything, this is probably going to be an instance where now, instead of being so blatant with their racism and stuff, they're just going to codify it a little bit more. Because that's what happens. Like, even in history, especially with the Republican Party of now, like, a lot of times their strategy has been to appeal to racist people. And then, instead of being blatant, they'll like calm things down for a while. Instead of saying the N word all the time, we're going to talk about strategies of like busing or all of these different things that on the surface level doesn't sound that bad. But in reality, underneath all of these roots are so rooted in racism, in white supremacy. Like, literally, chief strategists of the Republican Party, I forgot what year it is, who they were under, but said these things. and it's in the history books. So now, like, yeah, sure, it might not be Trump next time, but it could definitely be somebody that's a little more silver tongued, that can like pass over the radar as a little bit more moderate. And then they still have the same mindset. They're still able to activate the same campaign base.
And that's the scariest part, is that we will never, and I'm not sitting there saying that the Republican Party is, all racist or all of them, whatever the case, all of that, but it's a majority of them that hold these ideologies. And my whole idea, when it comes to Trump and all of his stuff, I always say that any supporter of Trump to me is automatically a racist. Automatically. You are anti-gay, anti-black, anti everything good, and everything good, because
There's no
to
excuses.
me there's literally none. And everybody's like, well, I didn't know he was that person, or I didn't know he was whatever. It's kind of like, y'all,
Where have you been?
come on, baby. He ain't never been shy about what he felt.
Wake up.
And let's be all the way honest about Biden too, about the fact that, baby, we're not gonna sit here and be quiet because Biden's in office.
No.
When he mess up, we gonna check him too. He is not, he just because Biden is the better choice does not mean that he is absolved of any mistake he's gonna make, because he's gonna make them. And it's our job as Americans to check people when they're doing that. The problem that we had with Trump was that we were checking him and nothing changed.
He wasn't listening.
He didn't care. That was the reality there. He didn't care, baby. So it's not that we're seeing that Biden is this Lord and Savior, that he is gonna eradicate racism. That's not the belief. But we are hoping that with the Senate, with all these things that have been turned blue, that have been turned Democratic, hopefully we might see some inklings of change.
This much.
Just this much. Because if we can keep going, eventually, we might get somewhere. That's the goal, is to really get people to wake up and realize that racism is a problem. And that's why I was really proud of Biden's inauguration speech in speaking about racism, speaking about white supremacy, condemning it in his first moment of presidency, saying this is not okay. And I feel like there are going to be people watching that hear that and going to be like, okay, well, he said it was. Because unfortunately, people see the president as the end all be all. So hopefully him saying those words might change a budding white supremacist ideology. Maybe.
And I think,
or at least
all else, like, having Biden in office, you can turn on the news and debate his policy choices. You don't have to turn on the news and be like, what is this person doing today? Like, every day under Trump is unprecedented. There was so many things happening. You never stop. Like, you can never take a moment to catch your breath. But now we can critique the president on things we should be critiquing the president for. It.
The real stuff. Trump was a magician. I say this all the time. He was a magician. He would have you looking over here at all the mess he's doing while he's sliding in anti-gay bills and anti-black bills. He's sliding those things in. But everybody's like, did you hear that Trump said grab her by the vagina or do this and the fourth? It's like, no, baby. No, baby, he's doing these things. These things are being said because he's trying to distract you from the real messed up stuff he's really doing. The stuff he's sliding by under his controversy. He is a reality TV show star. He knows what he's doing. Everybody says he's dumb. Everybody says he's stupid. I'm like, no, baby, he's not stupid. He's not stupid. Ignorant, yes, absolutely.
Very much.
Oh,
so.
Absolutely. But he's not stupid. He knows how to keep people watching, and he knows how to keep people in line, especially his fellow white supremacists. And he knows how to be like, oh yeah, let me call this person a blank blank. And then, oh God, the president. And we hear nothing about his policies. I honestly don't remember anything that Trump has done. Like, I don't, because we all we hear about is him saying we're in S hole countries and blah 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 and whatever. And it's like I don't even, I know that he's done anti-gay policies and anti-trans policies and stuff like that, but I don't know what they were specifically, because we're always hearing the news is just, I mean, overwhelmingly about everything he said on Twitter.
Right.
We don't hear anything besides that. And like you said, now we can take a breather. Now we know, okay, we can look at the president's policies. We can look at his executive orders and look at, okay, that makes sense. That doesn't make sense. Why are you doing this? Like you said, we can actually critique the president.
Right.
Not sit here acting like we're doing a TV show review of American Horror Story America. Like, yeah.
Literally every day I felt like, when's the cameras going to come out? Like, when is somebody...
Ashton Kutcher, where you at, baby?
When are we going to get out of this simulation that we're living in? Like,
so honestly, this has been a great conversation. But before we get out of here today, guys, we wanted to introduce a new segment to the Melanin Margin. And that is We Did As. So, so many little boys and girls grow up never knowing the full scope of what their culture has contributed to America and to the whole diaspora. So we're going to take a pause to rewind and remind the world just how we did that. So my We Did That this week is from an excerpt from Deborah Michaels, the PhD, and she wrote an article on Ruby Bridges. Now, Ruby Bridges advanced the cause of the civil rights movement in November 1960, when she became the first African-American student to integrate an elementary school in the South. Now, Ruby's birth year coincided with the U.S. Supreme Court's landmark ruling in Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, which ended racial segregation in public schools. Now, when Ruby was finally admitted to the all-white school, she and her mother were escorted by 4 federal marshals to the school every day that year. She walked past crowds screaming vicious slurs at her, some even going as far as to hold a black baby doll in a coffin as a dark threat of repercussion. Now, her first day was spent in the principal's office due to the chaos caused by white parents pulling their children out of school. Ruby ate lunch alone and sometimes played with only her teacher at recess, but she never missed a day of school that year. Now, while some families supported her bravery and some Northerners sent money to her family for aid, others protested throughout the city. The Bridges family suffered for their courage. Abon, her father, lost his job. Her mother, Lucille, was refused at grocery stores, and her sharecropping grandparents were evicted from the farm where they had lived for a quarter of a century. Now, over time, other African-American students enrolled, and many years later, Ruby's 4 nieces would also attend. And Ruby graduated from a desegregated high school and became a travel agent and is now married with 4 sons. Now, this was 60 years ago, and Miss Bridges is still alive today. Make no mistake, baby, racism was not centuries ago. And that's the thing that Ruby Bridges teaches us, is that she is still alive, y'all. This woman is still living and breathing. She survived in a time where racism was a very overt and in your face. Just because it's become covert does not mean it's been erased. Daquon?
right. And then for our next We Did That, it comes in honor of us finally being able to say our vice president is a Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
This excerpt comes from Because of Them We Can, as we remember Charlotta Bass, the first Black woman to run for vice president in 1952. Bass was a journalist and political activist who served as editor of one of the country's oldest Black newspaper, the California Eagle, for nearly 30 years. In 1952, Bass joined the Progressive Party ticket, running her campaign on anti-racism, fair housing, and equal healthcare access. She ran alongside presidential candidate Vincent Hallman with the slogan, "Win or lose, we win by raising the issues." The two lost to Dwight Eisenhower, but Bass had already made her mark and inadvertently paved the way for Kamala Harris nearly 70 years later. Bass was relentless in her commitment to Black politics and freedom, lending her support to any group or political party she felt was moving the needle forward, and withdrawing support if they failed to meet the mark. She confronted the KKK, addressed police brutality and violence, and spoke out against the harmful media representation, including the anti Black 1915 film Birth of the Nation. And I think my and Andre's stories, the ones we just shared, go well together because it reminds us that so many of the firsts that we are celebrating now happened on the backs of great people. So many people came before us, paving the way for us to be where we are today. But also remembering that just as so many people before us fought so hard to have conversations, to get things, to desegregate schools, to talk about things like police brutality and anti racism, that fight continues in all of us today. We are on their shoulders, and we need to make sure that we are continuing the fight as fervently as they were.
And just to clarify again, like I said, my article excerpt was from Deborah Michaels, PhD, that she wrote for the National Women's History Museum. I will be linking her article in the description box down below, as well as Daquon, so that you can read it yourself. Support, support. So thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you guys next week. It's going to be a great season. We've got some great topics that we're going to discuss with you guys. Remember, keep the conversation going down in the comment box below, and we will see you all next week. Same time, same place. Bye.
Bye.